always felt like an entrepreneur. I always wanted to run my own thing, build my own thing, create my own thing. When I say my own thing, I'm
Mike, it's so great to see you today. And I'm just so grateful because I know how busy you are. Thank you for taking the time to chat with me for this podcast.
no, I'm delighted to do it. Thanks for asking.
Awesome. Well, for those that are listening, they know I always like to start with a quote. So I'm going to read you a quote, and I just love to hear kind of what comes to mind for you once I'm done with it. So it goes like this. If we ever want to move from bosses to leaders or from superiors to mentors, we have a real obligation to look for burnout, both in ourselves and in our staffs. If it's us, we need to put on our own oxygen mask first and make sure we are not leading from a place of exhaustion, insecurity, and fear. And if we see the signs in our friends and colleagues, it's incumbent on us to step in to help. And that is from you, actually. That's a quote that you wrote. And so it was back in 2019, so I don't expect that you'd remember it, but
Yeah,
maybe you do.
wow,
What
wow,
comes to
yeah.
mind for you?
Well, that no wonder it resonated. I'll say that it really resonates deeply. I just think that leadership really is all about awareness and self-awareness, and especially in the entrepreneurial world, we do get burned out. We do get run down, and the people that we're trying to lead, they get burned out and run down too. And just being present to that, checking in with them is really important, and starting with yourself. I think leadership is an inside job, and it starts with yourself. It's about building that awareness and trying to stay tuned into what's going on around you.
Yeah.
I think that's where it all starts. So I
Mhm.
guess that would be my response to my quote.
So great. Did
Yeah.
you know that was your quote, by the way?
I did honestly.
So great.
So
I love it. I got the feeling when you said that. When I was
yeah,
listening to it, it sounded really like it was resonating. And
yeah.
there you go. So you had some wisdom way back then, and you still have a lot more that I want to learn about. And we always like to talk about kind of the early days and the entrepreneurial story. So can you talk a little bit about your entrepreneurial story and how you got into this whole thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I always felt like an entrepreneur. I always wanted to run my own thing, build my own thing, create my own thing. When I say my own thing, I'm absolutely keenly aware that I didn't do any of this myself. And this whole self-made sort of myth is just that, a myth. I've had just a whole lot of good fortune, good luck, and just wonderful co-conspirators. But I think going all the way back to really my youth, I knew that I didn't want to work for somebody. I always wanted to work with somebody. I think I'm a great partner. I'm not a great employee. And I just had that sense of myself, even at a very young age. When I got out of school, I knew I wanted to be in advertising. I was attracted to the field, but I didn't know enough to start my own agency at the time, for sure. And so I felt like there used to be a radio show host. His name was Bruce something or other. And I used to listen to him all the time. He said, if you want to run your own business, go. If you want to run a restaurant, you want to start a restaurant, go work in a restaurant, learn all the mistakes, do the cycles. And so I jumped off and I started my career at the time was the largest ad agency in the Southwest, called Tracy Locke. It's a smaller version of itself now. And again, I confirmed almost immediately, gosh, I don't like working for people, but I need to learn this business. I left there pretty quickly after about 9 months and joined a much smaller agency that was very entrepreneurial and real go. And I was playing sideline to sideline. I learned a ton. I loved it. And that's where I really did confirm for myself that, gosh, someday I really want to run my own thing. And also, Rob, this is important in the advertising agency business. I mean, it is just known for instability. Accounts come, accounts go, people come, people go. And while I was attracted to the business and I love marketing and advertising, that aspect of it really didn't appeal to me. I didn't want to be job hunting and fired and let go for things that I didn't do. And so I really realized early on that, man, I need to get to the top, and I need to create some stability for myself. If you want it, you got to create it for yourself. from that small agency, I realized, hey, I still need some more reps with a big brand agency. So I left there, went back up to my home state, my original home state of Michigan, and went to work at J. Walter Thompson in Detroit, working on Ford and Goodyear. And again, loved that experience, but also confirmed, gosh, I'm not a big agency guy, you know. And so after a couple of years there, I decided to bounce back down to Dallas, back down to Texas, and I took a real flyer with my career at the time. You know, I left this big global brand and I joined a little 4-person shop in Dallas named David Hadler and Associates. And I thought I would try my hand at business development. And you know, there's 2 functions in most businesses. It's running the business that you have, and so being an advertising practitioner. But then you've got to go win business, and that's a very different function. You know, it's a sales function. And it turned out I was pretty good at it. I had good instincts around it. My dad was a great salesman, and I think just sort of living with and listening to him benefited me. And I started to win new business at a really young age. So at like 26, I was winning new accounts for this little agency. 26, 27. And we grew that shop over the course of 5 years from 5 people to about 125 people. And it was exciting, you know, and I made all kinds of mistakes, which we can talk about, but I learned all kinds of great lessons, and it was a lot of fun. And I also learned what kind of company that I wanted to build. Well, my name was on the door. You know, the guy who started it was like, man, I want to keep this kid, so we'll call it Hadler, Sullivan, and Ewing was the creative guy. I was president at 28, you know, which was pretty heady for a kid at, you know, 28 to be president of a 125 person firm that was growing and blowing. We were named Adweek's hottest shop in the Southwest 2 years in a row, but I didn't have any equity. And this is the big lesson that I took away from there. It's like, you know, it's great to go build something, but you know, make sure you get, you know, a stake in what you're building. And just real quickly, then I wound up leaving there. I was recruited to a much larger firm, an Omnicom agency, and again confirmed the fact that, gee, I don't love, you know, the big agency brands. Did that for a couple of years, and then a friend of mine introduced me to my partner Paul Loomis here at the Loomis Agency 22 years ago. And Paul was desperate for someone to come in and help him build an ad agency. He's a musician by background, had built this wonderful studio. Little side story on Paul. He's the guy who discovered Vanilla Ice, you know, who was then Rob Van Winkle, Ice Ice Baby, and he produced his To the Extreme.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so Paul made a little bit of money on that, and he's like, man, I'm going to go build my passion project. And he built the studio here that is the nicest studio between here in LA and here in Nashville. At least it was circa 1999, and there's a lot of great competition now, but his unit economics changed dramatically. He went from paying $3,000 a month at this little studio he had, you know, across town in a not too great area to about $30,000 a month. And he's like, oh my gosh. And so we joke today that I built an ad agency to support his music habit, you know. And that's what I did. And so over the last 20 years, that's been the journey. You know, come in, and I made some mistakes. I'd learned some lessons, and I applied them. I made more mistakes here, learned more lessons. It's a big journey, but you know, 20 years later, we're about 65 people. We've got a great regional, semi-national reputation. The thing I think I'm most proud of is that we're a best places to work environment, and we've been awarded that distinction by the Dallas Morning News for 9 years in a row. So. Yeah. That's kind of the snapshot of the journey, Rob.
That's great. Thank you. And I love, you know, we talk about going out and learning from others and learning from their mistakes, maybe sometimes before we do our entrepreneurial leap. And you did a lot of that in the early days. And, but I'm excited to hear about some of the mistakes and the successes along the way. Before I ask you though, I know you went to college. We talked a little bit about that before we started recording. And, you know, this is a thing nowadays that a lot of entrepreneurs are trying to decide, should I even go to college? And I'm just curious, you know, what's your thoughts on that for yourself and the experience that you had? What did it do for you?
Yeah, well, for me, it helped me kind of grow up and mature. I was real young when I graduated high school. You can't do this anymore, but my mom started me very early, and so I graduated at 17. I was always a little behind. So it helped me mature. It also, I wasn't a really great high school student. I'm going to be honest. I mean, I think Gino talks about graduating with a 2.03 or something like that. I
Yeah.
was maybe just a click up, but not much. I just, I was more into dirt bikes and racing motocross and all that in college or in high school than really studying. So I kind of got my act together in college. I needed the time to just sort of cure a little bit. I was a journalism major at Texas A&M. I loved that. At the time, they had a great journalism program. I'm a creative person. I'm a writer. It let me hone my craft. It let me learn grammar, which is kind of crazy, but I
Right.
went into college not really having a great handle on the basics.
Amazing.
Yeah, and so it really it helped me in that respect. Some kids are further along, but I do think you need a little time to mature and make some mistakes and just learn a little more about who you are. So for me, that's what I did. I can't now, but back then when I went to A&M, my first semester, I think it was 15 credit hours and my tuition was $214. Now it's such a ridiculous, and I don't know what we're doing in this country. I can go off on a tear on that. Man, I think we'd want a more educated populace, but we're creating such barriers to education. It's just crazy. So I don't know if the ROI is what it used to be. That's a hard one to answer. Depends on what you want to do. If you want to start an agency, you want to get into advertising. Man, one of the most successful guys in our field, Alex Boguski, he graduated from, I think it was Miami High School and went straight in. He's a great art director and they built a terrific shop. And there's lots of I think the advertising industry is one place where you can navigate it without any academic credentials. And it's pretty cool that way. Yeah. So that's an interesting question. Yeah. I don't have a clear answer on it, but that path worked for me. And also, I'm not sure I would have gotten a crack at the big agencies that I wanted to get into at the time. I mean, you got to know what are the requirements to get the experience that you want to get. Tracy Locke wouldn't have hired me for sure. The other agencies I was looking at wouldn't have. Jay Walter wouldn't have. The little shop that I went to might have, but hard to say.
Okay, so now once you got with your partner and you have your own firm now, can you? We always like to hear the story of the nightmare and the dream.
Oh yeah.
So share them both if you have them top of mind.
Well, yeah, I'll start with the nightmare. So
okay.
Yeah, I got over here and remember, I'm a journalism major, so I don't have at the time, didn't have the strongest financial background. I really didn't understand a balance sheet. I didn't understand financials the way I really probably needed to. And I got over here and it became apparent very quickly that Paul didn't have enough money to pay me, really. I mean, he was going backwards in a hurry. And so at the time when I left, I had two young kids. My son was maybe 2 and my daughter was 3 and my wife was, she was a nurse, but she was taking care of the kids. And man, my dad at the time said, Mike, why don't you start your own agency? Well, that was the reason I didn't. I didn't have any money and I had a lot of obligations and responsibilities. So it's easier, I think, to catch a train in motion, which is what I felt like I was doing, all kinds of opportunity. But when I got in and I started to sort out the financials and realized how underwater we were, man, Rob, that was a wake-up call. Paul and I talk about this conversation on occasionally, but I went into him. I said, dude, you can't afford me. I need to move on. And I had some options at the time. And I really was thinking, wow, I need to go back to Omnicom. They wanted to send me to Connecticut to run one of their offices. And those opportunities were still there. And we had a great conversation. He had a little investment from a friend and he said, dude, I can afford you for about a year. I was like, oh boy, we got to get busy hustling new business and really rocking and rolling. And thankfully we did. That was what I brought to the table, is that business development talent at the time. One of the crazy things though, is that he had this little place at the time. I think there were about 15, maybe 18 people. And one of his big client was a car dealership, which it wasn't a great client at the time. And Paul didn't really know how to organize an ad agency. It was not set up traditionally. It was really set up like a car dealership with commissioned salespeople and just all kinds of craziness going on. And so I went out and we won a really tasty new piece of business called Community Coffee out of Baton Rouge. So I could pitch and win business Holding that business was another story. So 3 months later, they were gone, which was really, and that happened several times. We started to develop this little reputation locally of this agency that seemed to be able to win business, but boy, they lose it quick. So look at what they're doing, because we'll catch the rebound, our competitors, that kind of thing, kind of waiting. One a big regional co-op of the Dairy Queen business, and gosh, 6 months into that, I got a memo about this long from the president of the co-op saying, you got to cure all these things or the business is going away. Well, long and short of it, we did cure all those things. We became a much better agency. We held that business for about 13 years the first time. And we just started to build a roster, and as we built a roster, we were able to recruit the right kind of talent to help us handle and scale the business. So went from scrambling to scaling, and
yeah,
that's kind of where we are.
one of the things that I'm noticing in that story, amongst many things, is getting feedback from your customers early and often. We talk about that as one of the must-dos in your business. And you got the business, you messed it up some way, you learned, you got better next time, et cetera, et cetera. And then I think it was the Dairy Queen group that you were able to make that one right.
Right.
So huge.
It's a really good point, Robin. I think, sometimes we're afraid to ask for that feedback. It's like, let's not stir the pot.
Right.
The pot is stirred, whether you know it or not. You need the information, and you got to lean into it. And so while in the Dairy Queen example, I wasn't exactly soliciting it in that case, that did become a sort of a core practice, on an annualized basis. At the very least, we're formally asking our clients how we're performing. But man, if you're staying close to your clients and you're having real conversations with them, you stay in the discussion constantly, and our folks all do that. So, and that's a big part of our method. We tend to hold our clients something like 2.5, almost 3 times the industry average, and our team members as well. So that's a concrete metric that creates stability in the agency. And again, going back to what I was saying earlier, I like stability in business. We don't like the ups and the downs and the air pockets and the crazy stuff. I've got some stories around that too. This is better, much better.
Yeah, that's better. Yeah. And then what about the story of the dream?
Yeah, the dream was, always to build a well-respected top agency, certainly in this market and regionally, and we've really done that. In 2016, Advertising Age magazine recognized us as the best small shop in the Southwest, which is great. That was a nice accolade. We've got shelves full of trophies for our creative work. We have creative people who want to come work here, account people who want to come work here. I've set, I've built with the team here what I think is sort of just a beautiful little company. We've got our values all really well articulated. I've got this little purpose book. We've taken the time to really lay this stuff down. We operate on what we call a stakeholder model, where we're not, everything is not in service of the shareholders. It's in service of all of our stakeholders. Our team members are a key stakeholder. My aspiration for them is that they have what I call peak career experiences. When I hold this up, we have quarterly blueprint meetings where we celebrate our work and talk about the agency. When I hold that up, I talk to our team about, look, this doesn't mean that we're perfect or we always get it right, but we've got a target. We know what we're aiming at. We know what our values are. We know what we're aspiring to on behalf of all our stakeholders. We know what our mission is. And so we know when we're hitting it and we know when we're missing it. And so we tell our folks, and they do hold us accountable to this. This is something we are co-creating, and it's always in the process of creation. So I think the dream side of it is we built this really cool little agency that people love working at and hanging around, and we're, people are earning really good livings and they're building great careers. I also just love it when our team members, when they decide, hey, I've gotten enough of what I can get here, and they want to go on, they go on to just great positions with, really nice, wonderfully successful agencies around the country. So that's really satisfying. The impact on other humans, basically.
One of the things we talk about is the 6 essential traits of an entrepreneur. And I'm curious on your feedback when I read them to you, if you feel you have the 6 essential traits.
Oh boy. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I hope so.
They are visionary, passionate, problem solver, driven, risk taker, and responsible. How does that
Yeah.
land for you?
Yeah, I feel like every one of those. It's funny, the visionary one. I sort of, I definitely am the visionary for the company. I hold visionaries up as such, like, wow, Steve Jobs and
Right.
some of these other luminaries. I just think that it's such an aspiration. So I'm a visionary in my own context for sure, in terms of what I want to build here.
Yeah.
That's the one I kind of swallow on and go, wow, am I a visionary? And it calls me into something. It calls me into a great responsibility, which I really feel like I have
Mm.
a huge responsibility on behalf of everybody who's dedicating their careers and their lives and their daily toil, to this place. And so that's the one that I go, yeah, risk taker, grew up racing motocross, the little risk taking
You
love.
still ride motorcycles.
Yeah, and now it's mountain bikes, and
Okay.
they can be more dangerous than dirt bikes, and believe it or
Yeah.
not. But anyway, yeah, and every one of the other ones sort of hit me right
Yeah.
as well.
What about mentors in your life? Have you had mentors? And if so, have they been important to you? And how have you worked with them?
Yeah, one guy comes to mind, the guy that I went to work for at J. Walter Thompson, a guy named Robert Toussaint. And I just had breakfast with him about a week ago. He now lives here in Dallas. Man, it was the hardest interview I ever did. And I walked out of there going, man, I didn't get this job. He's just like grilling me on these questions. And they called him the cowboy at J. Walter because he was so
Okay.
good. He had long hair and he wore boots. And this is back in the suit and tie days. Robert, he was definitely a mentor. Just everything that he accomplished in the business, just his philosophy about life and about business always resonated with me. Did I like everything that he had to say? No, but by and large, he became just a great friend, and I think a real influence. And I think that's important, in life. So yeah, mentors and just people I look up to. Yeah, plenty of those.
Yeah. And then, you showed the book, which you called the Purpose Book.
Yeah, this
Yeah. And
little,
for those of you that
yeah,
are listening,
yeah.
Mike's got this great book. And if you go on YouTube, you can actually see it.
Yeah, it's
And
on our website too. I think we got a PDF on our
oh,
website.
okay. Okay.
I think.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So, can you talk more about that and how that relates to what you do with the team? And
Yeah.
is this part of the communication of the vision and what
Yeah.
the values, all that
Right
kind of,
on. Yeah,
yeah.
right on. So, and so this is something that I did for our company, and I do for other companies as well. Our
Mhm.
clients have invited me in to help them through this process, but it starts with your values, getting really clear on the things that are important for you as an organization. And that really starts individually as well. And then from there, you sort of build out your vision. What are you trying to create? Which feeds into your positioning, for in our industry. You'd think that ad agencies would be really good at positioning themselves, but we don't really eat our own dog food. We're great at giving this guidance and advice to clients, and we don't do it for ourselves. And so many ad agencies try to differentiate on capabilities. Look, we all do the same thing, some variation of that. So we struck on positioning around challenger branding, about 15 or 16 years ago, and it really resonated with our clients. Our clients are all challenger brands. We're a perfect size agency for challenger brands. Challenger brands aren't number one in the category. They're generally speaking every following brand. It goes a little deeper than that, and I won't get into that right now. But it spells all of that out. And tracking back to the values are really important for helping you make decisions, what you stand for, and really importantly, Rob, what you stand against. It's helped us make really important client choices. We don't take every client that comes knocking on the door. There was a time back in the day when I was scrambling that, if you had a budget and you wanted us, we're your agency. We can be a little more discriminating now, and it's really important based on our values, based on what's important to us and our team members. So we're very careful about who we invite into our organization, not just from a team member standpoint. And notice I use the word team member because I hate employee. I never wanted to be an employee. I don't know why.
Right.
So this is my thing, but also from a client standpoint. So, what kind of people are they? Let's start with that first and foremost. Are they respectful? Do they think that we have value to add? Do they treat us kindly? And we know that, it's kind of a war out there, in the world of marketing and advertising. It's very competitive. But are these people who keep their heads? We don't, all the bad behaviors we just don't tolerate. And at one time, we did, sadly. And there's no way as a leader that you can invite sort of that toxicity into your organization and then tell your folks, hey, this is a wonderful culture, and we really are concerned about you and your mental health and your well-being. It just doesn't, those two things don't add up. And so you have to make very difficult choices. And we have over the years. I can count on several clients that would have added significant billing to the agency had we brought them in, but they would have added, things that we just didn't want to incorporate into our culture. And again, values can help you steer towards categories of business that you want to work with, steer away from categories, and so on and so forth.
Yeah. In the early days, I'm curious, your experience was one of the must-dos that another must-do that we talk about is you have to work hard, really hard.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So this is interesting. So, and I'm a man of a certain age, I'm 58. And so, what it's like in the 80s when you come out of school, it's like, if you don't come in on Saturday, don't bother coming in on Sunday, that kind of thing, and there was, I'm not saying it was healthy, but people sort of wore their hard work as a badge. And
yes,
that's
true.
My friends who went for the big six accounting firms back at the time, they were the big six. I don't know what they are now. They were 80-hour work weeks and all that crazy stuff. But it's true. The harder you work, the luckier you get. That's something my dad used to say. Within limits, we opened this thing with a quote about burnout. Man, you got to balance it. You've got to figure out what's right for you. But yeah, you got to hustle or you'll get out hustled. And then at a certain point, when you build in the scaffolding, you build in the structure, and you've got some rhythm to your machine, you can sort of ease back. But there is a go hustle sort of phase to building any business. And man, if you want to do it, you might not be an entrepreneur. I don't know.
Right. No, you got to get out. I mean, I think in one of the gifts that you were so fortunate to have is the ability to go do business development.
Yeah.
And a lot of entrepreneurs, maybe like your partner, from what I'm understanding, they are great at the craft, maybe, but getting out there and selling it is kind of the stuck. Yeah. And so talk about that perfect match when you have two people like that come together to help grow the business. That's
a really important point. So if you're going to partner with somebody, make sure that you understand what you're each bringing to the game, and make sure that you respect one another and stay out of each other's lane, as much as you can. Paul is great at the craft of music development. He's a pretty good ad guy too. But music composition, man, that is his jam. And he's written and produced more jingles than you can shake a stick at. Many of them, without singing them. I'm not going to do that to you. But what he needed was somebody who was good at BD, and somebody who could actually build and structure an agency, which is both those things I'm pretty good at. Now, I will say that when I got here, there was one young lady at the time, Julie Andrusik, who's my partner today, who was just like a diamond. And she didn't have a lot of formal training. This was her second job. She'd only, she came right out of school and had a quick job and then jumped over here. But man, Julie today she's our operator. You guys in the EOS model, you got visionary and operator. Rob, tell me if I'm getting
visionary integrator.
Integrated. That's right. Yeah. I always mix that up because she's my COO partner. I mean, she doesn't miss a detail, and she's a student of the craft. She's awesome. There's no way this could be done without Julie by my side. And as we talk about next step, it's like her timing in terms of what she wants to do and when she wants to go is really important to me, because I'm not doing this without Julie. So finding great partners is really important, and then really being clear on what you're bringing to the party and what the other is bringing to the party is critically important too. Getting clear around that.
We talk about these different stages of business, and you had mentioned at the outset with Loomis, where your partner said, "Oh my God, I don't know if I can pay you." Can you talk about like the focus of generating cash flow when you started to really notice that, and how important it is overall as somebody who's an early stage entrepreneur?
Okay, well, I noticed it pretty quick because about 2 months after I got here, he was writing paychecks out of his personal bank account. So, and his personal bank account was getting really
Going
low.
down, it was dwindling.
So yeah, so it was, I always, I don't know why the Napoleon Dynamite with Uncle Rico throwing footballs over the mountain. I mean, I just felt like I was scrambling, just trying to hit anything. And we were winning enough projects to kind of keep the lights on month over month. And then we just sort of began to catch wind, and the sales started to fill. We didn't earn a decent profit for probably 4 or 5 years. And then it was sporadic, and only since really, I'd say in the last decade, did we start to become really nicely stable and profitable. And frankly, that was after hitting a huge air pocket too. About 10 years ago, I had, I think, 55 people working for us, and in the span of 90 days, I lost 50% of my top line through no fault of our own. And you talk about an existential crisis, I mean, wow, it's all fun and games as you're building and going. But when you got personal guarantees, which I did, you've got money in it, which I did. It's a story. It creates a lot of stress,
Yeah.
so.
Can you talk about the impact that a business like yours can have when your makeup of your total business is with, 1, 2, 3, 4 accounts?
Yeah. You're talking about the concentration issue. Yeah.
Mhm.
So it's wonderful to go win a big new account. And for us back in the day, I think it was the Texas Dairy Queen account, the very first one that we won. And I mean, from the jump, they were probably 40% of our revenue, maybe as much as 50 at one point. I was able to work that down by pulling in new business to about 25%, but not still, we had a concentration issue.
Yeah.
If they leave, that creates a real problem. So it's wonderful to win new business, but you got to double down on continuing to win new business. And this is the other thing I think that happens to entrepreneurs a lot, and it did to me early. It's like, wow, we went out and won this great new piece of business. Guess what? Now it requires all my talent to keep it, hold it. Guess what? I don't have time for now. New business. And so it's like this, it's this crazy, those were tough days because, I felt like I needed to run the business. I needed to be working in the business, but I also needed to be working on the business. And those are two just very different things. And so we developed a concentration issue, and I had 50% of my top line revenue tied up in 3 pieces of business. Dairy Queen at the time was 25%. Had another brand called Logan's Roadhouse, which is now, I think, defunct. They were 15%. And then there was another regional mattress chain called Sleep Experts that we really helped build, and they were 10%. And again, through no fault of our own, and it hardly matters why it happens,
Right.
it all went away. And that was I'd put such effort and energy into building this. I had kids going into college. I had personal guarantees out the yin yang. I mean, it was just the most stressful time in my life. And it caused a legitimate mental health crisis for me,
Yeah.
real. Thankfully, I was able to come through that and, got back to my game and just started to hustle hard and did win new business. And frankly, we rebuilt much better, than we were when leading up to that. We come back a lot stronger. We don't have the concentration issue at all anymore, which is really nice. You can sleep better. Taught me a lot of lessons. And I also developed some real personal practices to help smooth me out around that. You make meaning a little differently. It's one big journey. This has taught me a lot.
There's different stages we talk about again, and another one is changing to plan B, C, D. So I'm hearing that as you're speaking, there were things that how you had to evolve and look at things. But thank you for bringing up the personal practices.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious, with the practices that you have nowadays that kind of keep you in the right state of mind, looking back in the early days, had you known what you know now, would you have had that that part, would you have done that? Would you have incorporated these practices, and would you have had time to even do them?
Well, 100% I would have wanted to, and knowing the benefit of them now, it's like, yeah, that's magic. The time is the issue, because again, I had small kids, like one of my real cornerstone practices is meditation. And I was never, I'm an ADD guy, you know, I'm all over the place. And so, you know, the Zazen and some of the other traditional forms were really hard for me, but I went and I got trained in transcendental meditation. And so 2 times a day for 20 minutes, it's easy. And it really, it's just like magic, you know, it's not like, you know, take a pill and you're better, but it really smooths you out over the course of time. I walk 3 miles a day. It takes me at least an hour to about an hour and 20 minutes, generally do that in silence, or I listen to a podcast that's helpful for me, whatever. And then I'm a big mountain biker now. So I do that 2 to 3 times a week. Those 3 things, and there's others as well, really smooth me out. Well, when my kids were, you know, little, I didn't have a ton of time for that.
Right.
On the weekends, you know, my son and I used to go and race off-road motorcycles. So that was good. But again, that was pretty intense. And so I was going from a competitive weekend to a competitive weekend. I was just like, go all the time. I was like wide open. And it turns out that that doesn't trend well, you know, but you couldn't tell me that at 30 and even 40, you know.
Yeah. You know, I think whatever the modality is that one finds, and, you know, I'm a meditator as well.
Yeah.
It's, you know, there's such magic, as you say, really just in settling down for a little bit of time. I don't know what it is for the listener, but, you know, meditation's been useful for Mike and I, and just that time each day to settle down and let your body and your mind kind of catch up.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. I think people think that they're doing it wrong. You really can't do it wrong.
That's right.
And the longer you do it, it's my physician friends will tell me, like, your autonomic nervous system just sort of settles down. You recalibrate it completely. And sometimes if I'll sit for 20 minutes, it's like the first 15 might be like, ooh, I'm kind of all over. But that last 5 is just smooth.
Yeah.
You know,
Isn't
it's
that
like,
interesting?
sets you up. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
You keep trying.
Okay. So one last question. I mean, you've already given a ton of advice, so no pressure, but do you have any final piece of advice or wisdom that you might give to an early stage entrepreneur?
Yeah, the piece of advice that I would give is to work on your personal leadership. You know, just because you employ somebody doesn't mean you're a leader. You know, you might be a boss, but who wants to be bossed? You know, think about that. You want to be bossed? I don't want to be bossed. I'd like to be led and thoughtfully. And, you know, unless you've done some leadership training, maybe in the military, I don't know if that's, I'm sure that's a good place to do it, or other places. Nobody really teaches you how to lead. And so be deliberate about that. I didn't catch on to that until, long into my career, probably in my late 30s, early 40s. And it was a game changer for me. It really was, for me and for my organization. So, work on your leadership. And I think the foundational element around that, as we talked about at the beginning, was, you know, really building your self-awareness. And that it's not like, hey, I have self-awareness, I'm done, check that box. That's a constant work in progress, because we can fall asleep at any given time. So continue to work on your self-awareness, because when you've got more self-awareness, you have more choices and optionality. And when you have more optionality, you have more success. And it also brings with it a real responsibility to bring people along, people who aren't always seeing it the way you do. So that's my advice.
That's beautiful advice. Beautiful. And thank you so much, Mike, for taking the time to chat with me today. I'm just so grateful to you.
I loved it. Yeah. Thanks so much, Rob. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And to all the amazing entrepreneurs listening today, I greatly appreciate you spending time with us. And I wish you, as always, much love and gratitude.